Welcome back to Whiskey Politics. I'm Dave Sussman, your host and purveyor at whiskeypolitics.net. You can find us on America's Voice News, and you can also find us at YouTube. Don't forget to click the subscribe button and the notification bell so you can be updated on all of our interviews with fascinating people and all of your podcast applications of choice, including the Ricochet Audio Network and iTunes, Stitcher, and Google Play. I'm really excited today. We've got a couple of wonderful guests joining us today, including our first guest here, Dr. Carol Swain. Dr. Carol Swain is a conservative television analyst and a former professor of political science at Vanderbilt University. Her story is fascinating, coming from abject poverty to earning multiple degrees, including at Yale Law School. She is the author and editor of 9 different books and has been cited by 2 different Associate Justices of the Supreme Court of the United States. Dr. Swain speaks at multiple universities across America. You've probably seen her speeches. And she also is the voice behind Be the People. It's a blog and a podcast. It's dedicated to empowering individuals to think differently and independently, understand their responsibilities. Music to our ears. And we believe also she believes in their unique ability to make a difference in the world. Very special welcome to you today. How are you today, Dr. Swain?
I'm great. I'm excited about the new year and having gotten through 2018.
Yeah, it's been quite a year. And one of the things I wanted to open up with you about and discuss with you, you do a lot of speaking across the different college campuses across the United States. And as a professor at Vanderbilt and obviously multiple degrees, you've seen universities change profoundly over the past, especially the past decade. But you talk about modernism and postmodernism. Can you explain the difference and how that relates to what's happening today on college campuses?
Well, I mean, the roots of postmodernism and modernism, not modernism as much as postmodernism, is the cultural Marxism. And so we've reached the point where I would say that the majority of administrators and faculty members don't believe in absolute truth. And so because they don't believe in absolute truth, things that we took for granted, you know, post-enlightenment, when people believed in science. They may not have believed in religion, but they believed in science. Well, we find now that young people are told that there are no absolute truths. What's true for you might not be true for me. There's nothing that's objective. And as a consequence, we have all of this gender confusion. There are people that argue that there are 64 different genders, rather than science would say that there's male and female, and maybe a tiny percentage of people that may be born with abnormalities. But all of this confusion that we see in the world that is coming from the university campuses and the faculty members, that's part of what has taken place. The political left controls most campuses, and it's not just the secular campuses. I would say that they have a strong foothold on Christian campuses as well.
We start to hear things like race is a social construct or gender is a construct. Where's this come from? I mean, this is so outlandish to most people.
I mean, that's part of the roots of the culture of Marxism, but it's the belief that we construct our own realities, and so any DNA that would suggest that there might be tiny differences, you know, among or between people of different racial groups, all that's discarded in favor of the idea that everything, the whole world, is socially constructed. And that's where it comes from. It comes out of the postmodernism that's been on our university campuses for a number of decades now. What's different is that I would say a majority of the people that are running the campuses, they have organized everything around those beliefs. Anyone that believes in objective truth or believes in science, they would be marginalized in today's world.
You know, you've been in college life and campuses. I think you started earning your degrees, and you got a fascinating story. And I want to get into this in a little bit more detail here in this interview. But you all earned multiple degrees, and you were in colleges. What, during these 80s? I would assume. I mean, I went to college in the 80s myself, and my son, my oldest son, is 18. He's about to go off to college. We haven't decided. He's 6 for 6 right now in acceptances. I'm proud of him, but I'm deeply concerned as a parent today. How should we protect our kids from this postmodernist? I mean, I saw one of your speeches, and you said you believe like 98% of the professors are Marxists today, and they don't even own it. They don't even identify themselves as Marxists. Is that correct?
Well, I mean, they're liberal. And what I would argue is that when I was in graduate school in the 80s, and, you know, I started my educational process a little bit later than other people. But when I was in graduate school, there were professors who were proud Marxists. They said they were Marxists. They taught Marxism. But what I would argue today is that those ideals that the Marxists were discussing back when I was in graduate school, during my early years, I was at Princeton before I was at Vanderbilt, those ideas have become just a part of the norm. And so they're no longer, professors no longer say, very few of them say I'm Marxist, yet the Marxism has seeped into our culture. And when you ask me about what to do about the college campuses and the young people that we're sending off, I have a co-authored book titled Abduction, How Liberalism Steals Our Children's Hearts and Minds, that was published in 2016, and it talks about the environment that young people confront. And those who are raised in conservative households or Christian households, often their young people go off to college, and by Thanksgiving, they are questioning everything they believe. And as a university professor, I would say that from the moment your child sets foot on campus during the orientation week, everything is about pushing the values of the institution on that young person. And so it's all about erasing whatever they may have been taught at home, erasing that and replacing it with the values of the institution. The values of the institution will be liberal, left, postmodernist. The best way to prepare your young person is to prepare them for what they're going to confront. And I have argued that a lot of young people that are raised in Christian households, their children went on mission trips, they were in Sunday school, they may know all about Jesus, but they don't know the worldviews. They don't know what they're going to confront once they get on campus. The best thing we can do for our young people is to expose them to different ideas before they get in that environment where they're cut off from everyone else. They need to know other worldviews before they get to college, and they need to have an idea of what they're going to confront. And then once they're on the campus, they have an opportunity to seek out like-minded students and to form relationships with people that will stand with them when they're being attacked or when they're being marginalized. And the young people have to choose a strategy. Some people just decide to go along with whatever they're being indoctrinated with. Others may be silent. Some will push back. It all depends on the personality of the young person. But every one of them, whether they're going to a Christian school or a secular school, will be forced to make decisions.
And hearing you say, correct me if I'm wrong, is that it really does fall back to us as the parents, that we really need to prepare our kids for the onslaught that they're going to be receiving once they hit it. And then after the break here coming up, I want to talk about how they can actually turn this tide down the road after they've graduated college. So we'll be right back with Dr. Carol Swain right here at Whiskey Politics on America's Voice News. Dave Sussman back with you at Whiskey Politics. Very happy to have with us Dr. Carol Swain, who is talking about this modernist, postmodernist, what's going on the college campuses today. And, you know, we talk a lot about how we were able to turn this around and able to turn it around for our children who are going off to colleges. Don't we need conservatives to go back into academia if we really want a chance here to actually turn this big, massive oil tanker around? It's so heavy.
What do you mean by going back into academia? I'm saying this as someone, yes, I'm saying this as someone who took early retirement, and I am missing the young people, missing the energy. We do need conservative professors, and we need young people who can make it through the system. And I believe that there are enough colleges and universities and a few classical liberals who believe in free speech that our young people can make it through the system and become teachers, and at the college level as well as secondary school levels. It's difficult because the people that are making the hiring decisions, for the most part, you know, they have decided that if you don't believe what they believe, then you're too stupid to exist. But even given that, I believe that with the parents, with the trustees, with the various people, that they're reaching the point where people realize that their young people are not getting a good education, that they're paying hundreds of thousands of dollars for their children to be educated at elite institutions, and the students are not learning any critical thinking. They are being indoctrinated. They regurgitate information that many of them learned in grade school, middle school. And so they come into college thinking that they have the answers to all the big issues in the world because they have memorized the politically correct answer. So what we need to do, if we're going to somehow educate young people, we need to restore an environment where they can think and ask questions.
And get them to discuss all of the different viewpoints, correct? Because they're really only getting one viewpoint today, and that's coming from the liberal. And you talk about classic liberalism versus today's left, and I know that you've been on PragerU, and Dennis Prager talks about this all the time. There is a big difference between the left, classic left, and or I should say classic liberals, and today's leftists, aren't there?
There is.
Yeah. What experiences did you get? What, I guess, pushback did you get being on the college campuses from your fellow faculty regarding your viewpoints?
Well, I mean, I have the older faculty members, and I don't mean older. There are a lot of people on college campuses that believe in free speech among the faculty, because they realize that if you have an environment that's a witch hunt against conservatives, that the tide can turn. And so I think that the politically correct environment where they're encouraging the young people to look for offenses. So you have people that, especially the LGBT community and certain minorities, they're almost being groomed to look for offenses where they don't exist. And you see that with, you know, the universities now, they expect you to give trigger warnings if you're going to say something that might offend a person. And the problem with the political correctness is that the rules keep changing. They constantly changing the rules and the triggers, and the snares are catching even some liberal professors, you know, who have always been on the side of political correctness. They themselves are becoming part of the group that's being attacked. And in the meantime, the young people are not being educated. And you talked about modernism versus postmodernism. Well, when you think about modernism, the people that believed in, you know, the scientific method, they didn't believe in religion because, you know, you couldn't put God in a regression equation and prove that he existed. They believed in free speech. And so a lot of them allowed debates to take place on college campuses. I think you find fewer and fewer debates where there will be individuals that share different viewpoints. And I think it's dangerous, and it's not a partisan issue, because even among conservatives that are supposed to be Republican, more conservative, there's a lot of compromise. There are people that feel that they have to go along because they don't want to be called names. They don't want to be called racists or xenophobes or nativists. So they go along with things rather than challenging the liberal left on the facts. And the facts, have become enemies of truth. And with the political left, because they don't believe in any truth, it's very difficult, to have a debate with someone that doesn't believe in truth. And so all they're going to do is shout you down.
It seems like the left today, and the college left, the academic left, the primary focus is race or it's gender. In other words, it's identity. And if you were to have a discussion with them and say, look, my primary focus isn't race or gender, you're automatically branded as an epithet, as a racist. How do you enter a discussion today with people? Because there are so many other issues for us to discuss. And the college campus was the place for thought to be, put up there on a pedestal and for us to analyze it and to pull it apart and put it back together again. That no longer exists, right?
It no longer exists. And when we talk about race, and I have written an article, in fact, there's an article that's posted now with the Epic Times about how Democrats sabotage themselves with the attacks on Christians and whites. I find on the college campuses that statements that would be considered racist, if they were, if these statements were said against any group other than whites, whites have become targets of racism, yet they're not allowed to speak about it. And if you go back to the Civil Rights Act of 1964, it protects whites as well as blacks and members of other groups. And so the racism, the racial epithets that are allowed on college campuses against white men and white women, that should not be tolerated, because racism is racism, and no group should get a free pass.
Yeah, and we've got Dr. Alveda King coming up here, and January is the month of Martin Luther King's birthday, and we're going to be celebrating that. And the idea of the content of your character should trump anything else seems to have been just discarded, and everything now is about your race, is about your ethnicity or your gender or your perceived gender. It's a scary, scary time, and you came from a place where to do a small biography, you really pulled yourself up by your bootstraps. Abject poverty. There's a video that you have that you show before you speak about your childhood. And you worked for this, right? You worked for everything that you achieved in your life. You went back to school. You worked really, really hard. That seems to have been, completely, again, disbanded as far as an idea, and it's now all about victimology today. That's what's being taught.
I can tell you that as a young person, even though I was born and raised in the abject poverty, I always believed in America and the American dream, and that if I worked hard enough, that I could overcome the circumstances of my birth. And so I married at 16, had my first child at 17, later got a high school equivalency, went to a community college, and got the first of 5 degrees. I graduated with my bachelor's degree, magna cum laude, while working full-time at the community college library in that town. And so I have worked very hard, but I was willing to do that because I believed in America. Nowadays, we're telling people that if their skin color, is the color of mine, that there's no opportunities, that everything is racist, everything is stacked against you. A young person coming along today, I don't know if they would even try. And had I believed the messages that were being espoused by some of the leaders at the time I was even getting my education, I don't know if I would have tried as hard. But
really, wow.
I applied myself, and I was successful. And by the time I got to graduate school and I started studying theories of oppression, I had already gotten to the point where when they were telling, basically the message is that if you come from a background like mine, that you're not able to overcome that. By the time I learned the theories of oppressed and how disadvantaged I was already successful.
Well, it's because of your hard work ethic and your determination. And I think that's what you're, and we want to talk about this after this next break here, what you're teaching folks today, especially through the projects and the speeches that you're giving. So we'll be right back here. Last segment coming up with Dr. Carol Swain at Whiskey Politics. And Dave Sussman back with you, and delighted to have with us Dr. Carol Swain. Dr. Carol Swain is here talking about what's happening on our college campuses today with this political correct think that is being taught to our students, how maybe it's even impacting our culture and our society. Real briefly, during the break here, you just mentioned that you've got an upcoming book. I'd love for you to talk about that and how people can receive it. So what is the book and what it's about?
It's a new book that I'm going to be giving away as an electronic download, and it's titled From Democrat to Republican, A Southern Black Woman's Journey to Freedom. It's 4 chapters, and it's under 5,000 words, and so a person could sit and read it in an hour or so. But it talks about, my childhood, and I had to really think about why were we Democrats? When did we become Democrats? And in the process of going through that exercise, I thought about growing up in Virginia. Virginia was a state of massive resistance to integration. And I don't want to give away the whole, part about my childhood, but I can say that Virginia was part of the solid Democratic South. And then I became a Republican later in life. And so the book goes through that process of my learning, about the two political parties and how I fit in.
Okay, and that's going to be found where? Where will people be able to download that from?
From my website, bethepeoplenews.com.
Outstanding.
Instead of We the People, it's bethepeoplenews.com.
Yeah. You had another book, and you've written 9 books, so I guess this will be your 10th upcoming here. But one of your other books, it was called The New White Nationalism in America. You suggested the increase in the rise of the quote-unquote alt-right. You talk about that briefly, and how the left is putting on anyone who discounts or is questioning multiculturalism as xenophobic and racist. Automatically, you're branding. Going back to what we were talking about before, how they use words as epithets and cocoon you automatically as a racist to marginalize you. Look, I'm white. Okay, I'm Jewish. I believe multiculturalism isn't necessarily a good thing. I'm originally from London, England, and I've seen what it's done to my homeland in England, multiculturalism. But if I was to raise this, I would automatically be considered a Nazi, Jewish Nazi. Okay?
Well, let me say about this book.
Yeah.
It was published in 2002. Mm-hmm. The New White Nationalism in America is Challenged Integration. And I commissioned interviews of the 10 people that I considered leading voices of the white nationalist, white racist community. And they varied from people who would be really extreme to, there were 3 Jewish people that were part of this movement. And what I saw was the language of the political left, the identity politics, and the multiculturalism was being used by intellectuals among the white community who basically said that it's wrong. Some of them said it's wrong to discriminate. White people are being discriminated against. No one's speaking up for white people. And they argued that white people needed leaders just like blacks and Hispanics and Asians. And so what I noticed was that there were some legitimate issues, political issues, not being addressed, and that there was a new kind of white leader that was not using racial epithets, was not advocating violence, but they were saying that whites needed to organize like other groups. And in the concluding chapter of that book, I have policy recommendations, but I also said that white interests and white identity would be the next phase of identity politics in America. And that was published in 2002. Some people received the books, others thought I was an extremist. Nowadays, people are saying the book was prophetic.
And if people look at the alt-right, they may think that's exactly what it was. It was very pathetic and very prescient. But, if you've got the Black Congressional Caucus, if you have Asian students groups, if you have Latino student groups, La Raza, that's all fine. But if you, and I'm not a member of any such group, but if you were to have a white group of some type, a Caucasian group or whatever it is, that's automatically considered blatant racism, right?
Yes, and a lot of young white people notice the double standards. And if you go back to David Duke, you know, this guy that's all over the place, and, you know, he's been around since the 70s.
Neo-Nazi from Louisiana. Yep.
When he was in college in the 70s, he started the National Association for the Advancement of White People in reaction to the NAACP, National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. But if you go back to some of those leaders, they were upset because of affirmative action. But today, there are young white people that grew up with racial and ethnic minorities, and they really are questioning the multiculturalism that allows every other group except whites to celebrate their heritage and who they are. And I argue that this new white nationalism, which has parallels to the alt-right, that is the logical extension to the identity politics and the multiculturalism of the political left. The political left gave the alt-right and the new white nationalists the language to develop this, you know, parallel white interests and white identity.
Yeah, and my last question on this, and for you today, and I greatly appreciate you taking the time for us, is that when we talk about affirmative action, if anybody is to question affirmative action and the actual results of affirmative action, especially if I'm white, I'm considered a racist as well. But the fact is, and you've talked about this, affirmative action has not been very helpful to the African American community. Is that correct?
It hasn't helped the people that were really poor from backgrounds like mine. It's benefited the more affluent, the more middle class, and people like Elizabeth Warren, who, you know, really engaged in ethnic fraud because she was able to advance herself by claiming to be a Native American. And so there's no way you can get around the fact that she spent her life living a lie and engaging in ethnic fraud.
Yeah.
And there ought to be consequences to that.
And now she's throwing her hat in the ring for president.
Yes, and I mean, the political left ought to hold her accountable because it is ethnic fraud, and college admissions officers, they've always had to deal with a certain percentage of whites who will identify as a racial and ethnic minority to get the benefit.
Yeah. So as we close up here, to answer this, to contest all of this, you're talking about kids going back into academia, conservative kids, just to try to level the playing field. I mean, do you think that that's something that's achievable in our next generation?
Well, first of all, you mentioned your child. Your child should read George Orwell's 1984. As well as Saul Alinsky's Rules for Radicals. And even though, you know, I don't advocate deception, I do think that we're supposed to be wise, and that there's a place for people that are conservative to use some of those strategies. Make your enemy live up to his rule book. If you're on a college campus and the student handbooks say that they believe in free speech and they believe in the university being a marketplace of ideas, yet they're not allowing conservative speakers, then that's a contract. Make them live up to that rule book. If they say they treat everyone with respect, but they're disparaging conservatives and Christians, then hold them accountable for that. And then for some young people that want to be positioned in business or in places of power, keep your mouth shut if you can do it until you get positioned. And once you're positioned, then you hire people like you, and we can use some of the same tactics that the political left use that to regain power for conservative views.
Wise words. Thank you so much, Dr. Carol Swain. Where can folks find you again? Remind us. You're on social media. You have your website.
Yes, I'm on Twitter at Carol M. Swain, Facebook Professor Carol M. Swain, and my website is thepeoplenews.com, and CarolMSwain.com.
Great. We'll have all the links up under this episode, folks, and follow this lady if you're not already. She's a dynamic, brilliant woman and very inspirational. I'm looking forward to reading your next book that's coming out. Again, very special thanks to Dr. Carol Swain, and we'll be right back at Whiskey Politics with Dr. Alveda King. Thank you so much. And Dave Sussman back with you at Whiskey Politics. And if you haven't already done so, please find us at America's Voice News, our YouTube channel, Whiskey Politics, and you can hit click and subscribe in all of your podcast applications. I'm delighted to now have with us Dr. Alveda King. Dr. King is an activist, an author. She was the former state representative in the state of Georgia. And let me just make sure this is correct here. Was it the 28th district, Alveda?
28th House District. That was downtown Atlanta, and the state capitol was in that district at that time.
Oh, wow. Wow. Obviously, a very famous name, the niece of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., whose birthday is coming up here shortly. And welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Well, it's wonderful to join you and your listeners, and I guess viewers if you put it on your website. So hello, everyone.
Well, thank you very much. All right, so we got a lot of questions for you. We've got a short amount of time, so let's see if we can run through these here. Trump and the Democrats just passed what is actually one of the only bipartisan things I've seen in the last couple of years, and that's the Prison Reform Act. You've been focused on what you call bringing our dads home. How do you feel about what just passed?
Well, actually, I was at the White House in the Oval Office, the witness to the signature, have one of the pens, and I noticed that the members of Congress who were there continued to say, well, when we did the 3 strikes you're out act, we needed to think that through. It was too harsh. It has put too many people in jail, especially African American men. And I was so glad to hear that, because part of my work, my platform, along with the sanctity of life, the civil rights of the little babies in the womb, but also giving people in America opportunity rather than having so many of us in jail, especially African American men. So I believe criminal justice reform, we had a movement going with Bishop Harry Jackson. We still have that, bring daddy home. And we wanted to have something done for Christmas. So for me, the signing of the Criminal Justice Act was a Christmas present for many Americans.
What's going to be the net result of this, do you think?
Well, it's a progressive process. In other words, we'll begin now to look at some of the regulations, the red tape. The next thing, the sentencing. Should someone who had a small amount of marijuana get 25 years in jail, where someone who was on actual heroin or something like that maybe didn't get any time or got and plus time off for good behavior? Believe it or not, that kind of activity has been going on in America for quite a while. And so looking at the sentencing, there are some who are immediately impacted, and may up to maybe 4,000 prisoners may get out in the next several weeks if everything goes as planned. So there will be an opportunity for people to begin to come back. But these are not hardened criminals who committed murder or things like that. These are people who sometimes say in collusion. For example, we have one young lady at the American King Foundation, headed up by my goddaughter, former felon Angela Stanton King. And so one of the people that we're helping, she was dating someone who was involved in some drug activities. He calls her on the phone and says, "Are you at this party over on such and such street?" She says, "Yes." He asked her the question, "Is so-and-so there?" She said, "Yes." And then she was arrested for many years for collusion by answering the phone and saying somebody was at the party. So these types of things have occurred and put so many people in jail. And this is a year of Jubilee, seeing some of these moms and dad get out and come home and reunite with their families.
That's fantastic. Well, I think it's definitely needed, and it's nice to see how both sides were actually able to come together on this one really important cause. You obviously grew up in a civil rights family. You've seen it firsthand from obviously the tragic death of your uncle. there's so much division in this country today over racism. I thought we were beyond this. And I'm at a point right now where it's becoming really uncomfortable for me to listen to what a lot of the languaging that's now coming from one particular party, the left in this country, where everything is focused on race. It's focused on ethnicity. How did we get to this point, Alveda? I mean, isn't this the exact opposite of what your uncle and you and your family have espoused for generations?
Well, my dad, Reverend Alfred Daniel Williams King, known as AD, my uncle, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., ML, were warriors in the civil rights movement. They caused me and my brothers also, because we were youth and young people in that same movement. One of the premises out of the Bible, actually, Acts 17:26, of one blood God made the human race, or made man, or made people. And so understanding that, my uncle, Reverend Martin Luther King Jr., said we must learn to live together as brothers, and I'll add as sisters, or perish together as fools. So we're not separate races. The concept of there being a black race, a white race, a red race, and a yellow race is not true. That is socially engineered. Because if you look at the DNA composition of the blood inside the veins, of course, when you cut that vein, it bleeds red, but under the skin it looks blue. So we're seeing that we are one human race. I'm writing a book with a friend, Ginger Howard, and the name of the book is We're Not Colorblind. In other words, we can see color, we can see ethnicity, but we don't think that that makes one of us better than the other. And I know you didn't ask me this question, but there's a book out now called White Like Her. And a young lady found out that her mother was passing for white. She had African-American blood or Negro blood, but she was passing for white. Last year, a mother birthed twin girls. They look identical, except one has what's called white skin and one has browner skin. And so I guess the mother says, I had a biracial baby pregnancy or what? No, you had a human pregnancy, birthing human girls who just have skin that's different color. So we're not separate races. We are one human race. And I learned that from my daddy, AD, my uncle Emil, and my granddaddy. And they got that out of the Bible.
What happened to the whole idea that we should be judged on the content of our character, not the color of our skin? Where is that today?
People have not necessarily received that, and they want to continue to fight. I call it a lower frequency. Skin color is such a low frequency because it does not define, as you just asked, it does not define character. Character is just so far above skin color or physical appearance.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that. Another question for you. You are currently, I think you were involved in a new movie that's coming out called Roe v. Wade. I know that you are a leader and an advocate for the life movement. Talk a little bit about this. We have a mutual acquaintance, Mindy Robinson, who was on our show a few months ago. I think she was involved in that movie as well. Roe v. Wade. Tell us about this movie, where we can find it.
Well, Roe v. Wade, and you can see the trailer. We're releasing a new trailer on the 15th of January.
Okay.
And we'll be at the March for Life. When I say we, I will be with Nick Loeb and Kathy Beckerman. They are the creators of this film. I'm an executive producer. Actually, I portray the mother of Dr. Mildred Faye Jefferson, an African-American physician, the first Black woman to graduate from Harvard Medical School, and she helped to found National Right to Life. So I'm an executive producer, but I also act in the film because along with being a state legislator and all of that, I have an acting career, and I'm a singer and a songwriter too. So I still enjoy a little bit of that, in there. Yeah.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. So the movie, where's it going to be distributed through? Where will we be able to see it?
It's going to be distributed and it'll be on the big screen. Okay. And we're not releasing the information as to who has the distribution yet. But people are going to be actually surprised. We're not even calling it a pro-life movie. We're calling it an information type of documentary that shows exactly what happened that caused that legislation to be passed. We're going to examine Norma McCorvey, one of the doctors, Dr. Nathanson, who was one of the top abortionists. We'll look at it from their viewpoint as to how they were used and ended up participating in the bill being passed, along with Dr. Jefferson, who said, no, we can't do this. So we can see it goes inside and behind the scenes on what made that bill law.
How did the entertainment industry, Hollywood specifically, react to this movie? Have they helped it or hindered it?
Hollywood seems not to be excited about Roe v. Wade at all. And we know that many people are fighting for abortion as a woman's reproductive right. And that's the case in Hollywood as well, quite a bit. But the question that I have to keep asking Hollywood and everybody, yes, a woman has a right to choose what she does with her body. But we have to ask the question, where is the lawyer for the baby? That's a human byproduct in the womb. My pastor who passed away, Alan McNair, he said, if it's not a baby, leave it there. Nothing will happen. You know, so of course it's a human being. And so I do support women's rights. Absolutely. But as a civil rights leader, I just have to say, how can the dream survive if we murder the babies? It's not going to work.
Yeah. On to another real quick issue here for you, because I know that we're tight for time here. I was reading some articles, and this was pertaining to your experience voting in 2016 and 2018, and coming to your precinct and finding that certain candidates were not even on your ballots. Can you talk about this and what happened?
Well, in 2016, I wanted to vote for the Republican candidate. And it turns out that I think in the primary, I had either asked for an independent ballot and they gave me a Democrat ballot. I didn't know it. So I didn't really look, and I voted. So then when I went back to the general, they gave me a ballot, and it was, I said, wait a minute, I want to vote. And I wanted to vote conservative and Republican. But they were saying since in the last election, I hadn't voted that way, I couldn't vote. And then it happened again in midterm this year. And so at this time I said, listen, I'm going to say this to you. And I began to speak very loudly. I said, everybody knows I'm Alveda King, and I voted for President Donald John Trump. And I want a ballot that lets me vote for the Republican candidate for governor now. Well, we can't give it to you. And then a lady eased over, one of the poll workers. This is our ballot. I said, ma'am, did you just hear what I said? I said, I tell you what, I'm going to call the FBI, the CIA, the police department. I said, but let me call the governor's office first. I still remember the governor's phone number on speed dial because it's the same number that was the governor's office when I was a state legislator.
Wait a minute.
So I called
our ballot office. Meaning what? It was racial?
It's a black lady giving me a Democrat ballot telling me this is our ballot. I'm serious.
Our ballot,
that's not
meaning
even legal.
For blacks.
Yes, we're black. This is the way we vote. So I became so loud, and I was on the phone with the governor's office. And so the governor's office says, have you tried the Secretary of State? I said, transfer me if you want to. And they said, let me speak to the poll manager. So in a few minutes, she looked, ma'am, we're going to give you this ballot. You can vote for whoever you want to vote for. Because I was turning the poll out very loudly.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's hard for you to believe that. I'm seeing your expression that people.
How widespread is this?
It's widespread because you found out down in Florida in the gubernatorial race, the poll manager down there had been not counting votes accurately, losing votes and all of that type of thing. So what the folks who support the Democratic Party platform want you to think is only Republicans are suppressing votes, but it's happening more from Democrats controlling the African American vote. That's really the truth.
Well, these are issues we'd love to have you on and discuss in more detail down the road. I know you're tight for time today. Where can folks find you? You're on social media. You've got a website. Where can folks go to find more about you?
Please visit me at alvedaking.com. And during January, we've got a music video on our homepage about Martin Luther King. And then there's some information about civil rights for the unborn as well. And you can also find me at civilrightsfortheunborn.org.
Thank you so much for taking the time. We will put a link up to that music video. And thank you for everything that you do. You're an inspiration. Thank you.
Thank you. God bless you. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you. Take care. Take care. All right. And folks, you can continue to find us at America's Voice News. And don't forget to hit that subscribe and button on the follow button on YouTube and all of your podcast applications of choice. Again, very special thanks to Alveda King and Dr. Carol Swain. And we'll be back again very soon at Whiskey Politics.